In this video, I will explain price floors. As you remember, markets are efficient. Markets usually result in efficient outcomes. But sometimes the market price does not work for everyone. When that's the case, the government intervenes in these markets. As you remember, we call these policies price controls, and there are two types of price controls: price ceilings and price floors. We covered the price ceilings in our previous video, and now we will explain price floors. A price floor is a legally established minimum price a seller can be paid. In this case, the government believes that the price established in the market is too low, and therefore the government changes the market price and establishes the price above the equilibrium market price. One example for price floors is the minimum wage law. On this graph, we see the labor market for unskilled workers. As you see, in any market, we have the price determined in the market through the interactions of buyers and sellers. The labor market is not different. As we see on the vertical axis, we see the price of labor, that is wage, and on the horizontal axis, we have the quantity of labor supplied and demanded. We show this by using the letter L. So in this unskilled labor market, the market determines the equilibrium wage rate. And as you see and experience in many cases, the equilibrium wage rate in these labor markets is usually too low. Let's make it $8 per hour in our example. And of course, this hourly wage rate is not good enough for the low-income people. So the government intervenes in these markets and sets a minimum price for the unskilled labor. And that minimum price will be above the equilibrium price. Let's say $15. This price floor is the minimum price or the minimum wage a worker can be paid. And that's why we call it the minimum wage law, and because this is the minimum price. Since now we intervene in this market, we face the consequences. Remember, in the labor market, firms demand for labor, so we have firms here, and workers supply labor. So in this labor market, when the government imposes this minimum price, the price floor, that is $15 in our example, the quantity demanded by firms, the quantity of labor demanded in the labor market will be low, but the quantity supplied by workers will be high. The difference, of course, is a surplus of labor. And of course, in the labor market, the surplus of workers is called unemployment. Let's put that here, unemployment. So the first consequence when we look at this picture is a surplus in this market. And of course, when we're talking about labor, the labor market, that surplus will be unemployment in these markets. Let's see who wins and who loses as a result of the minimum wage law. Let's take a look at the sellers, the workers. Workers are selling their labor services. In this market, some workers, this L, let's assume that, let's give some easy numbers. Let's say at the equilibrium we have 100 workers hired at the equilibrium price, but as a result of the minimum wage law, some workers will be unemployed and only 50 workers will be hired. So those 50 workers, those first 50 workers who are hired and paid $15 will win. Let's put that here. Some will win. But on the other hand, some other workers here who are willing to work, they can't find jobs because of this higher price range. And they will be unemployed. That means some workers, some sellers will lose. How about the buyers, the firms? All buyers will have to pay $15 for these workers. That is higher than the equilibrium wage. So all buyers will lose. When the cost of labor increases, some firms may substitute machines with labor, and employees will probably lay off the least skilled workers, and of course these are the ones who need protection. As we see here, the goal of the government is to protect the lower income people and improve their standard of living, but whenever we intervene in markets, whenever the government intervenes in the markets, we face the consequences. Another example for a price floor is agricultural price supports. Through supply and demand, the market determines the price of agricultural products. But most of the times, this price determined by the market for agricultural goods is too low for the farmers. Farmers work all year long, but what they get out of their crops is not enough for them to have the standard of living. So there's a role for government to support the agricultural community, and as a result, the government imposes a price floor on these goods. Of course, the price floor has to be above the equilibrium price because it is the minimum price. We want to make the farmers better off. We want to increase their income, so we want to impose this minimum price on these goods. But again, since we're intervening in these markets, we face the consequences. Suppose that this is the corn market, and since the price increases for consumers as a result of price floors, we will have fewer buyers willing to buy corn in this market. Let's show that here. So here we have quantity demanded in this market at this higher price, but at this higher price, more farmers will be willing to produce corn, so they're willing to sell more quantities. Quantity supplied will be greater than quantity demanded. As a result, we will have a surplus of corn in this market. Let's put that here. One consequence will be surpluses in these markets. Now let's take a look at who wins and who loses. In this case, let's take a look at the buyers. Some buyers will buy, but the price will be higher than the equilibrium price. And some other buyers, they're willing to buy corn, but the price is too high, so they're not going to buy corn in any of these markets. So all buyers will lose. All buyers will lose. Now let's take a look at the sellers, the farmers. At this minimum price, at this price floor, some sellers, some farmers will be able to sell their crops up to QD, because we sell, let's say, QD amount of corn. Let's say it's 50 units, and compared to the equilibrium quantity that is less than the equilibrium quantity, let's say the equilibrium quantity is 100 units of corn. In this market, as a result of this price floor, only 50 units of corn is bought and sold. So from the seller's perspective, some sellers will win, some will win because they're now selling their corn at a higher price, at the minimum price. But some sellers could sell their corn, but because they can't find any buyers, they cannot sell. So some sellers will lose, some lose. So these are the policies that the government can implement to help the lower income groups. But we always need to know that we face these consequences, and we need to implement these policies knowing the consequences.